People are calling, like Barbara Lee and Tulsi Gabbard, are calling for an end to the certain aspects of the war on terror, or renegotiating the authority to use military force, which is the funding and the authorization for the war on terror. But we need a popular resistance to this. We need, it's like I grew up during the Vietnam time, and there was a popular resistance to the war in Vietnam. We don't see anything like that in this country today. 16 years. You have to remember that the war on terror is the longest war in U.S. history at this point, the oldest war in U.S. history, and also the most expensive war in U.S. history. And this doesn't make any sense. Originally started out to go after the terrorists that committed 9/11, many of whom supposedly died on 9/11. So going after a ragtag group of students and Taliban in Afghanistan, that shouldn't take more than a couple of weeks. But from the very beginning, they said this is going to take decades. Well, why? Because they knew that the real underlying strategy for the war on terror was to redraw the map of the Middle East, to conquer territories, and to cut the Arab countries into pieces. And that would take some time.
So yeah, you talk about sectarian enclaves. They want to have a Kurdistan. How does that benefit Israel to break up their surrounding Muslim countries into smaller sectarian groups? Is it just because they're fighting with one another, and that Israel, if they're smaller countries, that Israel is more powerful?
Well, yeah. First of all, if they can break up the Yinon Plan, the Oded Yinon Plan of 1982 made very clear that on the Eastern Front, Israel's primary targets were Iraq and Syria, in that order. And the first thing they wanted to do was to destroy the military of Iraq and Syria, and then to fragment the country along its ethnic lines or religious lines. It's called balkanization because it's the big Ba'ath states, the big Arab states like Iraq and Syria, and Saudi Arabia's on the chopping block too. So it's like nobody. It's happened to Libya, it's happened to Lebanon and Yemen and Sudan. It's the game plan.
Do you think that Saudi Arabia is going to give up some of their land to Israel? Because if you look at the Greater Israel Project, the Eretz Promised Land, that goes into Saudi Arabia. Are they going to? Because it seems like they're working together with ISIS, and they're not exposing them for 9/11. They work together on 9/11 and arming the Mujahideen. So, is there a deal worked out where they're going to give them the promised land?
I don't know. I don't know how it's going to shake out. But I have seen that the maps of this balkanization in the Middle East do affect Saudi Arabia. They're trying to achieve this plan. And in Syria right now, they're breaking the country up into 3 pieces or 4 pieces. And Iraq has already been broken up into 3 pieces. As I said, on the 25th of September, there'll be a referendum in Kurdistan to become independent of Iraq. That's what they want to do, but there are obstacles along the way. In the case of Syria, there's been some obstacles in the form of Iran and the Russian military.
In the foreword to your book, Alan Sobrowski writes that you're optimistic that Trump might disclose 9/11 truth. I'm not sure when he wrote that, if he had already bombed Syria and revamped the war in Afghanistan, but do you still have that sentiment about Trump?
Well, I hope that Trump will do something about 9/11 truth and ending the war. He spoke about these things when he didn't speak about 9/11 truth specifically, but he did talk about having better relations with Russia, ending the conflict in Syria, and he has done some good things. He's pulled out from the CIA funding of the Syrian rebels. His war in Syria is now coming to a conclusion, largely because the United States has pulled back its support. So that's a good thing. The sooner the war in Syria is over, the sooner we get some balance, the better. I would, of course, prefer.
You really think that's possible? There's any chance that he will do that?
Well, he has had very close relations with Israelis and American Zionists for a long time. But that doesn't mean that he's in cahoots with the 9/11 cover-up. I would hope that as a New Yorker and as an American, he would not cover up the truth of 9/11, which is fundamentally what I'm talking about here.
Sure,
you know, and
sure,
you can, you know, as a political leader, and when he ran for office, he told his policy guy that he wants to be the most pro-Israeli candidate out there. He was saying that because he wanted to win the election. Um, but I bombs that went off simultaneously with the plane impacts, which is pretty true, pretty correct. I mean, good observation. And as you said, 2 days later, he changed his tune. So whether somebody called him up and told him to change his tune is most likely the case. But that's happened all across the U.S. You know, I saw a professor from New Mexico Tech. He did the same thing. On day one, he spoke. You know what we've lost.
So guys, I had to turn my fucking Xbox off, which is not
when they were mature, when they were able to grasp it.
Yay,
and they know what we have, what's being lost in this country. Whereas young people who were, you know, just a couple years old when 9/11 happened, the war on terror has been like the wallpaper in the room for them. It is accepted.
This ain't my real voice, by the way.
And they don't realize what this country has lost and what this country is losing.
Good, I guess.
So it tends to be.
Now we're gonna get into your famous CNN.
That's why I like this voice better.
Do you know what year this was?
This was done.
Then who? Thanks to the exemplary work of scholars.
One of these days, I might get better skin like he does.
Christopher Boland.
Dude, he's on level 26. Dang. This boy is.
Israelis
This guy
and
has to be
Zionist
badass.
Jews in key roles in the 9/11 attacks. Now look, if they can prove me wrong, like I said, I'll pay with my life.
Wow.
Since they want to kill me anyway.
What? Why is this so long?
Prove me wrong.
In the Muslim world, you know, outside of the United States, I really don't know what their opinion is, but I do know that in the very beginning, in a global poll that was done, 7% of people believe that the Israelis were behind 9/11.
7%?
Yes.
Cass Sunstein writes in his paper that the majority of countries, Muslim countries, believe it, and that's why it's so dangerous.
I should get out of his business.
They believe that 9/11's a conspiracy.
Oh yeah,
and most of them believe it was
that the Israeli military intelligence was involved in the creation of the war on terror. When you understand that the war on terror construct is a construct of Israeli military intelligence, then the Israeli involvement in 9/11
and then join.
Because what you find in 9/11 research in the Solving 9/11 books shows that at every critical point, there's an Israeli agent involved.
Okay, now
Recently, what's most troubling is when it reaches the internet and goes into the Muslim Arab
I
world,
didn't know we were
they have
doing
this
a 1v1.
cross-fertilization of hate. And this is something we've never
On the
seen
side,
before.
I can't
Does
really.
it seem like the ADL is trying to associate 9/11 truthers with the terrorists, like we're terrorist sympathizers?
Yeah.
We're terrorists too, essentially. Is what
I'm not
What you're
really
saying
that
is
close to
that
the
the
mic.
9/11 truth that looks at
Hello.
Israeli involvement in 9/11 is hateful.
Hello.
And you know, the thing is,
I can hear
first
you
of all,
pretty
we're not
fine.
talking about Jews
I
as a
just
group
can't hear
or
you.
Israelis as a nationality. We're talking about a very small subset. Obviously, this was a cell that was created back in the 1970s. It took
All I
from
hear
9/11.
is
Your challenge now.
Yeah, I'm not
Israeli
that
involvement
much
in
of a
9/11.
pro at this game.
Let's just do the top 10. You don't have to get into all the details. People can watch your presentations. And
Really?
read your books, which
I haven't
they
even
also
landed
do.
to the
It's
ground
really
yet.
but let's go. 10 bullet points.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well,
Undisputed evidence.
let's go chronologically in here. In 1978, the senior Israeli intelligence agent in Hollywood, Arnon Milchan, made a film.
Wait, how am
first
I in
film
your
made
house?
in Europe, in which a Boeing
I don't even
747
see you,
was
so how do you see me?
building in New York.
Oh.
So that's like deviation, putting the idea out there.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. You're on my. You have 8 bucks. You have a buck.
I don't even know which building you're at.
Was that movie? Did they
You
already
right
have
there?
Yeah, it was predictive programming and put it out? Yeah, they get the idea from 9/11 from the movie.
No,
What
they, that's a good question, because
What?
what you see is in the late 1970s, Menachem Begin from the
Okay, where'd
Likud
you go?
created the Likud Party in 73.
What?
came to
Let's
power in
go.
77.
What the?
And that's when the ball started rolling. The dual ball, the war on terror,
Ah!
and 9/11. So that in 1978, for example, 1 year after
Wait, why is
Menachem
this
Begin
guy
became
called
prime minister,
Streamer?
Arnon Milchan makes his film
Dude,
in which
I don't see no scar.
The same year, 1 year later,
I didn't find the scar.
the founding father of Mossad, predicts to an American Zionist that Arabs will attack.
Yeah, I couldn't find the scar. Like,
Hey,
what?
you took my trap, dude. You
And
took
20
my
years
trap.
later,
That's
it
my
happens.
trap.
Okay, so there's two.
Yeah.
Medusa
same
says prediction.
Protect.
I remember reading that on 9/11 is
Yeah.
that an attack
I
on
don't
them is really
understand
an
what
attack
you
on us.
wanted,
Right.
but
I
okay.
do not mess
Exactly.
around.
So that was
When it
3. Then the
comes to
conference where they rolled out the propaganda for the war
Hey,
on
where's
terror.
my shotgun
Yeah,
shells?
and then
What do you
Issa
mean?
Harel, a couple of years later, 2 of his
Shotgun
senior
shells.
lieutenants,
Where's my shotgun shells?
I didn't pick them up because I didn't have any.
and, Shalom Ben Dor, Avram Shalom Ben Dor. These names are a little bit dodgy, but these 2 men are senior lieutenants under Issa Harel in the Mossad. They were involved in the kidnapping of Adolf
More
Eichmann,
shotgun
for
shells
example,
for
from
me.
Argentina. They were involved in the smuggling of plutonium from Pennsylvania to Israel. So these are very high-level Mossad agents. And they come to the United States like in their 50s or 60s, within their 60s, I guess, in early 1980s. And they try to get the security contract for the World Trade Center. They get a contract in 1987 for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for the World Trade Center in some sort of anti-terrorism protection for the World Trade Center. And when it's discovered that
I can
Avram
hear
Shalom
your
Ben Dor is
controller in
using
the
his fake name,
background.
and he's been convicted of murder as the head of Shin Bet, Egyptian Colonel Salem $1 million to testify against the, motley crew he had collected around him, including the blind sheikh. These people went to jail for like 5,000 years. Michael Chertoff was a key person in the prosecution from New Jersey. And the case had its roots, the conspiracy apparently had its roots in New Jersey, according to the operation. Michael Chertoff then, fast forward a few years, is then the Assistant Attorney General of the United States, responsible for, he was given the portfolio for investigating 9/11, the 9/11 crime. But rather than investigate it, Mossad agents in Israel. And
You read about that in your book.
Yeah.
She worked for the airlines that brought all the people there.
Right, from Yemen, Operation Magic Carpet, I think it was called. So,
and isn't his dad a Talmudic scholar?
Yes, that's right. Rabbi Chertoff. And so, Michael Chertoff plays a key role in the prosecution that didn't happen. The investigation that was a non-investigation. That's really important to understand because
Where are you
if
at?
9/11 had been investigated by any competent law enforcement in this country,
Do you watch
the
Naruto?
game would have been up.
No.
So they had to make sure that there was no proper investigation. So what did they do? Instead of calling it a crime, they called it an act of war.
I watch shows that
By calling it an act
begin
of war, it meant
with
that the military
rated
the
and for mature, like swear word
there
shows.
would be no investigation. So then Michael Chertoff basically facilitated the cover-up by confiscating
Where are
evidence
you?
from videotapes and steel and engine parts everything, all that, and then facilitating the cover-up. So, and he's a key person. The operation could not have gone ahead.
Seriously,
They
where
not
are
made
you?
sure that they
Where'd
had
you go?
absolute 100% security in the form of control of the U.S. law.
Seriously, just go. Like,
And Michael
seriously.
Chertoff's cousin was at Popular Mechanics working on the debunking 9/11, and you were the one that called his mom and found if they were related, and she said yes. 9/11, number 2 at the FBI.
Oh, I took your ammo.
Michael Chertoff?
Yeah.
He was Assistant Attorney General. And he was in charge of the criminal division of the Department of Justice. And he was the one.
I just found.
John
Okay,
Ashcroft,
so
who was Attorney
do you
General,
watch trolling
gave the
videos?
portfolio to Chertoff. Chertoff had the final say in all decisions regarding 9/11 investigation. Then later, he became the head of Homeland Security.
I'll take that as a
the
no.
second one, I think. And in that position,
So,
he maintained
I'm
control
tr-
over the evidence of 9/11. That's very important.
So,
Because
do you see
the
trolling
9/11
videos,
crimes,
like
you
trolling
have to look at
videos?
the cover up and the destruction of evidence. And there again, you find that the
Trolling
network
videos.
that destroyed the evidence,
Oh,
the
yeah.
junkyards that were responsible for the destruction of
So,
evidence,
I'm trolling this guy and his baby
Israeli
sister, and they just rage, like,
So
so
Michael
bad.
all his connections. The junkyard.
The junkyards.
Also,
All of the federal computers on 9/11, military computers, and they had spent 2 years in the basement of the FAA with MITRE Corporation, checking to see the interoperability between the FAA and military in the event of a catastrophe just like this one. And the computer after 1990.
so they still got it even though they had it
Yeah.
canceled.
I don't
They
even
got-
know
they
where
got
you
through
are
using
at.
an American Trojan horse.
And they finally got it and then pulled it off shortly after. It looks like fun.
Philip Zelikow is a very Zionist guy. He had a lot of
That's
power
actually
with
good.
George Bush and began with George Bush as president. But when they wanted to do a year later, more than a year later, when they wanted to set up this 9/11 commission to basically right the myth, they first went to Kissinger, but Kissinger didn't want to reveal his client, so the second choice was Philip Zelikow. And so Philip Zelikow became the executive director of the 9/11 Commission report. And he came to the table with a fully detailed outline of what the commission report would say in the end.
Oh
Before the
no.
commission even began meeting. And Mr. Philip Zelikow, he's...
Is it somewhere that...
Texas or Southern California.
I was just about to say.
When he got his degree, I think his PhD was on the creation and maintenance of the public myth. And that's what he created with the 9/11 Commission report. So it's like when I concluded my solving 9/11 book in 2011, I wanted to
Purples are very
investigate
good. Not gonna lie.
how the deception was contained by the destructive evidence and the cover-up. And that's really important. Like Nixon said, it's not the crime that gets you.
Evidence of 9/11.
Huh?
Even more in your face than the buildings blowing up and coming down.
Where are you? Because you see, it'll take
I'm somewhere in the
real
buildings.
investigation to find out who put the nanothermite in the World Trade Center,
Well, I know that.
where the nanothermite was made,
Which
etc.
Taking
fingerprints of
somewhere
actual
that
criminals
I'm buying
involved
somewhere
in the
that
crime.
has a clock tower.
That's hard to do. But the people who are involved in the cover-up and the deception
that shows
and
the
taking the
what?
country to war,
Yeah,
based on the
that
law,
shows the time.
that's all very clear. So what we really need is a huge investigation in this country in which all of the people who are involved in the 9/11 crime and cover-up
Oh,
are
jeez.
arrested and charged and investigated thoroughly, like Share Talk, to find out who was calling the shots and connecting the network. That would require something no less than a political revolution in this country, because it would stand the entire power structure on its head. That's why I'm saying that we don't have a lot of hope that within. It's like we live in an occupied government right now. We live in a government that's occupied. Our nation's occupied, and trying to work within this occupied government for 9/11 truth, when the whole deck is stacked against you, is very difficult. That's why it's going to take popular revolution.
They Google 9/11 conspiracy.
That star is
theories,
just
and
powerful.
And it's going to be an article saying that.
Yeah, I know, because I was just...
Conspiracy theorists
The
believe
jetpacks are so
4,000
slow,
Israelis
like...
didn't show up to work that day. I'm sure you've heard about this. Or was that?
I was trying to look for a guy.
No, it's red herring.
No, it's completely true that about the 4,000. I mean, as reported in the Jerusalem Post.
That's what you call
The source is the Israeli Foreign
that
Ministry.
you just don't have a weapon at all and you still
It
get
came
killed.
from family members in Israel calling and finding out that they didn't go that day. Like they were all
Information about that person, one of those 4,000 people, and the instant messaging seems to have worked in that many Israelis seem to have gotten the message to stay away from the World Trade Center that day.
only 2 people came forward as reported.
Well, two people in Israel got the message.
That drop pack, that freaking care package didn't have crap.
Haaretz newspaper and maybe in the New York Times once,
What?
or the Washington Post once, and never reported again. It was the whole story about the
What?
prior warning from Politico, and the indication, the evidence that Israelis were
I don't
warned
know.
ahead of time was never discussed again.
No.
But there's no evidence.
No evidence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
11.
How upsetting is it to you?
6.
Look, we've been kicked around for 2,000 years.
What?
The
I don't even
facial
know where
evidence,
you
the
are.
anger
Now I'm gonna
because of
take
that.
your
That's not a way to live, wandering around the globe, never having a home.
Well,
It's
this
pretty
ain't
difficult
going
because
easy,
every
that's
time
for sure.
there's trouble, We're scapegoated.
No, you did not.
But we're
You just
scapegoated.
started
People
counting.
who are frightened, they don't care.
All I heard was you just counting.
This theory. It is madness as well as idiocy to think that the Jews
Well, I barely got anything
World Trade
still.
Center on 9/11. But you cannot argue logic to someone who is mentally ill. What frightens me is that the whole nation is frightened, and that fear is being fueled by this administration and by the media.
Who is this guy?
Michael Gross, constitutional lawyer, it says.
I've never seen him at any other time besides this.
No, I haven't either.
But it's weird that he comes on and just, first of all, they're on a panel with CNN. Everybody is against the conspiracy. Why don't they have you in studio to actually have a rebuttal to his arguments?
Right, well, if you look at the CNN piece, you see how they tried to set me up. They asked me if I was anti-Semitic. I said, no, this is what they said.
Did you see that?
Policy. Then they cut
Somehow,
Do you see the port of Fort?
in the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, people are going to look at you. Critics will say, you are an anti-Semite. Are you?
I said, do you see the port of Fort?
This is the main charge that's leveled against me, and has been for years, even before 9/11, because I am a critic of Zionist policy.
That's a very common technique among anti-Semites. They will twist things. I'm not an anti-Semite. I just believe X, Y, Z.
So it's, with video editing, that's been done by CNN. This was a hit piece, and this piece aired on TV the night before I was on trial.
Elaborating on the whole
I wasn't even in there.
It's like literally any criticism of Israel to them, or criticism of people behind 9/11 is anti-Semitic. So according to them, they can't do anything wrong, and there's no legitimate criticism. That's
Well, that's not part of what they're saying. What they're saying, though, is that you cannot criticize Israel. You cannot criticize Israeli crimes. You cannot criticize Jewish crimes, or you cannot identify them as being Israeli Jewish crimes. They're protected. That's what they're saying. They're not saying that Jews or Israel doesn't commit
I'm
crimes.
on 3 HP. What do you mean, how?
Quote from the former chief of staff.
I'm going to die.
Who says that if the truth ever comes out, he
No.
says you will see that Israel has been involved in crimes
Check in there. If I'm
1,000
missing
times
anything.
worse than anything going on in
I didn't
Colombia.
take anything.
I'm a
Like
kill
Colombia's
you.
drug trade. So it's not like Israel doesn't commit crimes. It's that
I'm running for my life
it's
now.
a crime to report them. It's a crime
Run
to
for my
identify
life.
them as Israeli crimes. I don't write anything
I
about
got
Jewish
3
crimes. I'm
HP.
writing about a crime that was committed on Michael Sherritt's house.
You mean blue pump?
That's as far as it goes. It's
Fine, I'll drop
when
it.
you investigate a crime. The reason why I call it solving 9/11
Oh, jeez.
is because
Yeah, where's all the rest of
9/11,
the
I could see from the very beginning, was not.
What do you
going to be
mean?
solved. There was no interest
I
in
do
solving
not have the
9/11 at
rest
all.
of the
They
material.
gave us a prepared false
Oh,
narrative
yeah,
of the war,
For some reason, it
and
picked it.
that's what we're supposed to live with.
Wow.
So when I approached this as an investigative journalist, I looked at Netanyahu. So
What?
then the
I just. Oh,
consistency
wow.
was-
That just took like half of my
100%.
health.
So the
Just
question
from
was,
falling down
okay, so are
that
these
roof.
Israelis all
Seriously?
involved in the crime, covering up the crime, promoting the deception? Means much more than the
I didn't
state
take any
Israel.
of your
When you talk about
loot.
the Zionist
'Cause I
establishment,
didn't go
they're
near
talking
it.
about the Rothschilds as well.
I'm
They're
pretty sure
talking
I
about
know
the Zionist International that is located around
Wait
the
a
world.
second.
You
Where
mentioned the
is
Jesuits.
my
I hear a lot that
red? Oh, never mind.
the Jesuits control the Zionists, or the Zionists
Gotta keep me
created the
talking
Jesuits to
about
take out the
it.
Catholic Church. Where does the Jesuits fit into this whole Zionist 9/11 scenario?
I was just
There are other players, like Mr. Mueller from the
Hey,
FBI,
in
who
my
came
AR
on the scene 7 days before, but he was the junior man on the totem pole. Above him, he had Michael
Yeah,
Chertoff
don't think
telling
I
him what to
didn't
do,
notice that, boy.
Rudy
What?
Giuliani, or Governor Pataki.
My
But in
AR.
every case, you find that
AR! You did
these
not have an
people were
AR.
not the masterminds.
Oh, I
There
just
was,
found myself
another
an.
person
I just
who-
found
who
myself
had
a
very
scar.
clear ties to Israel, who was the person making
I
the
have a
decision.
scar.
How about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers? I've got a friend who's a big-time 9/11 guy. He thinks that Rockefellers planned 9/11
I didn't touch
when they
it.
built the towers in the 50s, I believe.
I don't have anything. Oh my god, it's
What
freaking.
part do you believe
half
the
bullets.
Rockefellers
Oh,
played?
no, it's right here.
Well, I don't
Never
think
mind,
that they
I'm sorry.
planned to destroy the towers as they did, because the towers were destroyed using a form of nanothermite that was only
Look at this
invented in the
dude.
1990s. Whether they had this idea down the road that they would destroy these towers, I don't know.
That should, if the Medusa touch is predictive programming, then you have
What?
lone gunmen and all these other things that we've seen.
Well, I'm taking these small.
Yeah, I don't know why they do
whatever
that.
they're called, potions.
You know, but like you said, the lone gunman episode that was done by, again, Arnon Milchan's business partner, Rupert Murdoch, made that film. It aired on Fox TV 6 months before 9/11. It depicted some people say that it's because they wanted to lower their karmic debt. I don't know how that lowered their karmic debt, but
Like black magic or something. Yeah. Law,
Hey,
you have to call. You write in your book, you speculate that the filming of the lone gunman may have been part of the final planning for 9/11.
yeah, well, I mean, in the sense that they used helicopters and they flew at night across Manhattan, across
Whoa!
you know, when they filmed the plane coming into the World Trade Center, that footage they needed, they did it at night. They flew a helicopter, and that, you know, they're flying the path that the planes took to hit the World Trade Center.
I just got a launch pad and I'm gonna drop everything now.
Why was that done? I don't know, but it's what they're doing is that
I'm dropping everything I just
visualizing,
picked
they
up.
were manifesting.
I got 6 bullets on my
filming,
scar.
You know, and
I didn't have wood either.
I guess he doesn't go to 9/11 truth regarding the Israelis, but I've seen some things, you know, some videos he's brought out where he talks about being visited by Mossad, and he says something like,
How does it say that you don't have that?
So that means you can go
He's spreading the blame and pointing fingers elsewhere. All he talks about is
I
20
don't even have a
But
shot.
he admits in that video where he talked about the Mossad visiting that Israel had a role. He does say that. But
I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and bye! And he ended up winning, by the way,
just as
guys.
controlled as the mainstream media, because media requires money.